The room went quiet when the badge scanner chirped red and the plant gates locked themselves in front of her. Not a warning. Not a delay. A full shutdown. Margaret Hale stood there with her lunch pail still warm in her hand, the steel doors reflecting her face back at her like a verdict. Inside the control tower, above the floor, someone swore. A clipboard clattered. The siren did not scream yet, but it breathed low and waiting like a lung filling before a shout. Someone had cut her access. She did not turn around at first. She felt the stairs before she heard them, the hum of the line dying, the clack of boots on concrete, the air changing heavy with the smell of hot oil and panic. When she finally looked over her shoulder, she saw the plant the way a camera would. Long aisles, conveyor belts slowing to a crawl, men and women frozen mid-step, faces tilted toward her, a woman in a gray cardigan with silver hair pulled back tight, standing alone at a locked gate, like she had done something unforgivable. "Who locked her out?" a voice snapped from above. Margaret knew that voice. Everyone did. Daniel Whitmore, 45, the new chief executive, sharp jaw, sharper tongue. He had been on the job 3 months, long enough to change the logo, long enough to cancel the pension review, long enough to tell people to move faster without learning their names. A supervisor jogged over breath short. "Sir, it was automatic. The update, I didn't ask for an excuse?" Whitmore said. He leaned over the railing, sleeves rolled watch bare. "I asked a question." Margaret felt the ache in her lower back flare as she shifted her weight. She had been on her feet since before dawn. Night shift had run late. A bearing screamed on line 3, and she had stayed to quiet it. She had not gone home. She had not changed. She had not complained. She had done what she always did. Keep the place breathing. Now it was holding its breath. Margaret, the supervisor, said, lowering his voice, "Maybe step aside." She did not move. She looked up at the tower. The glass caught Whitmore's face and broke it into angles. He was angry. Not loud angry. Controlled. The kind that believed it was righteous. "You," Whitmore said, pointing. "You were flagged as the last manual override." Margaret nodded once. "I was, and the system went down 10 minutes later." "Yes. So, explain to me why the only person still running paper diagrams is the common thread." The word common landed hard. It rippled through the crowd. Margaret felt it pass through her like a draft. She thought of her hands, the oil in the creases, the notebook in her pocket, soft at the corners. She thought of the men who used to stand where Whitmore stood, men who asked before they accused. "I didn't cause the shutdown," she said. Her voice was steady. It always was. "I prevented it from tearing the line apart." A few heads turned. A few brows lifted. Someone snorted. The snort belonged to Evan Brooks, 32 Systems, engineer, brilliant smile, faster mouth. He leaned toward the woman beside him. "She prevented it," he said, not whispering. "That's rich!" Margaret did not look at him. She looked at Whitmore. "Bring her up," Whitmore said. "Now." The elevator ride was too fast. It always was. The plant fell away beneath her feet, a living map she could trace with her eyes closed. When the doors opened, the control room smelled of coffee and ozone. Screens glowed, lines scrolled. A young analyst sat rigid at his desk, knuckles white eyes, flicking between charts and the glass. Whitmore did not offer a chair. He did not offer a greeting. He gestured to the main display. "Explain this," he said. Margaret stepped closer. The lights hummed above her. She squinted, then reached into her pocket and pulled out her glasses. The frames were old, the lenses were clean. She read the data the way some people read weather. "You pushed the update live across legacy interfaces," she said. "You assumed the firmware would negotiate." Evan laughed. "It's backward compatible." "It's not," Margaret said. She tapped the screen with a finger that trembled just slightly. Not the way you think. Whitmore's jaw tightened. So you overrode protocol. I isolated a cascade, she said. I slowed it down, and in doing so, you tripped the lockout. Yes. Silence stretched. Whitmore folded his arms. He studied her, the way men studied tools. Useful. Replaceable. You're not cleared to make that call, he said. I've been making that call for 20 years, Margaret said. With permission. From people who aren't here anymore. The words were a blade. They cut deeper than he knew. Margaret swallowed. She felt the room watching, waiting for something like shame. Whitmore straightened. Here's what's going to happen. We bring the line back without your shortcuts. If it holds, you're reassigned. If it doesn't, he let the sentence hang. He did not need to finish it. Everyone understood the shape of it. Evan smiled. Not kind. Relieved. We've got this, he said, glancing at the others. We don't need. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. A low groan rolled through the plant, like thunder underground. Someone shouted from the floor. The siren inhaled. Margaret closed her eyes for a beat. She saw the diagram as if it were laid on a kitchen table. She saw the hairline crack no one wanted to see. Whitmore's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His face changed. Not fear. Calculation. Restart, he said. Now. They're not ready, Margaret said. You'll tear the couplers. Do it, Whitmore snapped. The analyst's hand hovered. He looked at Margaret, then at Whitmore. He hit the key. The siren screamed. The plant lurched. A monitor went black. Another flashed red. Someone cursed. Someone prayed. The sound was enormous and intimate at the same time, metal arguing with itself. Kill it, Margaret said louder now. Kill it now. Whitmore hesitated. The room held its breath with him. Then he nodded. The noise died. The silence afterward was worse. Margaret exhaled. Her shoulders sagged. She felt every year of her age settle into her bones. That, she said quietly, was the warning you didn't want. Whitmore stared at the screens, at the costs, tallying themselves in cold numbers that spelled real jobs, real homes, real nights without sleep. He looked at her again, this time differently, not kinder, sharper. You think you're the only one who understands this place? He said. No, Margaret said. I think I'm one of the last who remembers why it was built the way it was. He paced. Once, twice. He stopped in front of her. Fix it, he said. The words were flat. Final. Or you're done here. A murmur rippled through the room. Evan leaned back, arms crossed, eyes bright with the thrill of the cliff. Margaret met Whitmore's gaze. She felt something old and steady rise in her chest. Not defiance. Responsibility. I'll need authority, she said. And time. You'll get neither, Evan said. This isn't a museum. Margaret looked past him, at the plant, at the men and women below who would feel this first. She thought of the locked gate, the red chirp, the lunch pail growing cold. She nodded once. Then what breaks next, she said, won't be an accident. Whitmore did not answer. He watched her walk to the console, hands steady now, breath slow. The camera would have caught it then. The moment his certainty faltered. The moment he realized the simple woman in front of him was not simple at all. The plant did not come back to life. It held in a kind of suspended stillness, like a heart refusing to beat until someone made a better promise. Margaret stood at the console with her palms resting on the cool edge, feeling the vibration settle out of the floor. Her breath slowed. She could hear things again. The whisper of cooling metal. The tick of a relay somewhere deep in the walls. Sounds you missed when you were rushing. Sounds that told the truth. Whitmore broke first. Clock's running, he said. Every minute costs us. Every bad restart costs you more. Margaret said. She did not turn. She knew where he was by the tension in the room, by the way people leaned toward him without realizing they were doing it. Evan slid into the chair beside the analyst and pulled up a dashboard. "We can roll back the update," he said. "Clean reset. Not clean," Margaret said. Loud. "Don't start," Evan said. "This is standard. Standard is how you got here." A few engineers shifted. A woman near the glass bit her lip. Someone coughed. The siren light above the door blinked once red, then went dark again. Whitmore looked at the screens, then at Margaret's notebook, now open beside the keyboard. The pages were dense with pencil lines, boxes inside boxes, arrows that bent back on themselves. He frowned. "What is that?" he asked. "History," Margaret said, "and consequences. Put it away." She looked at him then. Her eyes were clear. Tired, but clear. No. The word landed with a soft thud. Not rebellion. Boundary. Whitmore's mouth tightened. He glanced toward the glass, where a man in a hard hat stood, with a phone pressed to his ear. Union rep. He recognized the look. He had been warned about it during orientation. This place had teeth. "HR is on their way," the analyst murmured. "And safety." "Good," Margaret said. "I'll need them." Evan laughed, short and sharp. "You're calling a meeting now." "I'm asking for witnesses," Margaret said. Whitmore stepped closer, lowered his voice. "You're pushing me." "I'm protecting you," she said. "From yourself." That stung. He straightened. "You think you know me?" "I think I know pressure," she said. "And I think you don't know this machine." Evan rolled his chair back. "This is ridiculous. She's stalling." Margaret's hands moved. She pulled a folded schematic from the back of the notebook and laid it flat. The paper was yellowed. The lines were precise. Line 2 was built to forgive mistakes, she said. Line 3 was built to punish them. You tied them together with a bridge that assumes the same language. They don't speak it. Whitmore glanced despite himself. The drawing pulled him in. He hated that it did. He hated that it made sense. A woman in a navy blazer entered, breath quick, eyes sharp. HR. Behind her, a man with a union pin on his collar. They stopped just inside the door, taking it in. The still plant. The cluster of engineers. Margaret at the console. Whitmore squared and ready. "What happened?" HR asked. "Update failure," Evan said. "Legacy interference." Margaret didn't argue. She waited. The room did something subtle. It leaned toward her. Whitmore gestured. "We're fixing it." Margaret nodded. "With oversight." The union rep's gaze settled on her. He recognized her. Everyone did, even if they didn't know her name. The woman who stayed late. The one who knew which breaker sang before it died. "You're Margaret Hale," he said. "Night maintenance." She nodded. "You're asking for authority." "I'm asking for accountability," she said. "Written. Timed. Observed." HR frowned. "For how long?" Margaret took a breath. Her lower back protested. She ignored it, long enough to stabilize and prove what's broken isn't just a part. Whitmore opened his mouth, closed it. He did the math. Optics, liability. The siren that almost screamed. 2 hours, he said. With supervision. Margaret met his eyes. 4, 2, 4, she said. Or we do nothing and watch it fail later. Silence. The union rep shifted his weight. HR checked her watch. 4, Whitmore said finally. "You get 4. Then we reassess." Margaret nodded once. "Thank you," Evan scoffed. "Unbelievable." She turned to him then, not angry, appraising. "Sit with me," she said. "No." "Sit," she said again, and this time there was steel in it. "Or leave the room." Whitmore raised a hand. "Sit." Evan hesitated, then dropped into the chair. His jaw worked. His eyes flicked to the notebook, like it might bite. Margaret pointed to a line on the schematic. "You see this," Evan leaned despite himself. "That's an obsolete loop." "Only if you ignore the patch from the year the river flooded," Margaret said. "They rerouted power to keep the pumps alive." "They never wrote it down in your system." "I did." "You expect us to trust a pencil," Evan said. "I expect you to trust the floor," she said. "Listen." They did. The building whispered, a low harmonic that wavered and steadied as she adjusted a parameter. The sound changed. Evan's brows drew together. "What did you just do?" he asked. "I stopped it from fighting itself," she said. "Now help me." Minutes stretched. Then more. Margaret moved slowly, deliberately. She asked for logs, old ones. She asked for eyes on the floor. A mechanic called in readings. Another reported heat where there should be none. Margaret closed her eyes, then nodded. "There," she said. "That's the fracture," Evan typed. Paused. "If we isolate, that we lose throughput." "Temporarily," she said. "Or permanently if you don't." Whitmore watched the clock. He watched his people. He watched the woman he had almost dismissed command a room without raising her voice. Something in him bristled. Something else deeper took notes. "Do it," he said. They did. The plant breathed, slowly, carefully. A conveyor rolled. Another followed. The siren light stayed dark. A cheer almost happened. Almost. Margaret lifted a hand. "Not yet," she said. She leaned back, wincing. For a moment her age showed. Evan saw it. The tremor she hid. The way she favored one leg. "You okay?" he asked before he could stop himself. She nodded. "I will be." He swallowed. "You should have been in those meetings." "I was," she said, "until I wasn't." HR scribbled notes. The union rep watched Evan watch Margaret and made his own. The screens settled into green. Not perfect. Stable. Whitmore exhaled. He hadn't realized he was holding it. He stepped closer, lowered his voice. "This doesn't end here. It shouldn't," Margaret said. "If you want it fixed." "What do you want?" he asked. She looked at the floor, at the people, at the plant that had fed generations. "I want a bridge," she said, "between what you build and what you forget." Evan stared at the schematic, at the pencil marks that saved them. "We can't keep running on ghosts," he said. "Then stop pretending they're dead," Margaret said. Whitmore nodded slowly. The camera would have caught the change then, the shift from command to consideration, not surrender, something harder. 4 hours, he said. "You bought us time. Tomorrow we talk." Margaret closed her notebook. Her hands shook now that the danger had passed. She let them. She had earned that. As she turned away from the console, Evan stood. "Margaret," he said. He cleared his throat. "I didn't know." She paused, looked at him. "Now you do." Below them, the plant moved again. Not fast, not loud. Alive. Morning came gray and slow, the kind that pressed against the windows and made the plant feel older than it was. Margaret arrived before the sun cane, tapping once against the concrete. Before she remembered, she hated using it at work. She folded it, slid it into her locker, and stood for a moment, with her forehead resting against the cold steel. The ache in her hip pulsed. She breathed through it. Then she turned the key and walked back onto the floor. People were already watching her. Not openly, not the way they had the day before. This was quieter, side glances, conversations that dipped when she passed, respect trying to find its shape. Uneasy, unfinished. Whitmore stood at the far end near the conference room jacket, off sleeves rolled again like armor. He was on the phone voice, low, careful. The word board drifted across the floor like smoke. Margaret caught Evan hovering near the control rack, coffee untouched eyes on the screens, as if they might argue back. "Didn't think you'd be back this early," he said, when she reached him. "I didn't go home," she said. He nodded. He didn't ask why. He watched her set the notebook down. The pencil already sharpened. They're not happy, he said. Downtime spooked the investors. Downtime should scare people, Margaret said. It tells you where you're weak. Evan rubbed his face. They want answers. So do I. Whitmore ended the call and walked over. His stride was measured now, each step chosen. We've got a problem, he said. We have several, Margaret said. Which one is loudest? He didn't smile. Safety flagged a pattern. Minor incidents, near misses. They're not random. Margaret's pencil paused. She felt the floor shift under her feet, not physically, but in the way a truth prepares to land. Show me. They gathered around a screen. Reports scrolled. Dates. Times. Locations. Margaret traced them with her finger, connecting dots no one had thought to connect because no one wanted to. This isn't a software issue, Evan said. It's operational. It's cultural, Margaret said. Whitmore stiffened. Be careful. I am, she said. That's why I'm saying it. She pointed to a cluster. You see this gap? Night shift. Always night shift. Always the same corridor. Evan frowned. That's where the retrofit starts, and where experience ends, Margaret said. A door opened. The union rep stepped in, hat in hand, eyes scanning. Heard you're digging, he said. We are, Whitmore said, with transparency. The man studied Whitmore, then Margaret. Good, he said, because my people are tired of getting nicked by decisions they didn't make. Margaret met his gaze. So am I. They moved to the floor. The camera would have followed them down the corridor, where the lights buzzed and the air felt wrong. Margaret stopped near a panel and knelt slowly, breath tight. Evan hovered, ready to help. She waved him off and opened the panel. The smell hit them. Burnt insulation. Old. Hidden. Someone's been bypassing safeguards, Evan said. Someone's been told to, Margaret said. Whitmore's jaw set. By who? She stood with effort. By incentives. He stared at her. Explain. You tied bonuses to speed, she said. You tied promotions to numbers that don't care who gets hurt. You taught people what mattered. Evan swallowed. We didn't mean I know, Margaret said. That's the problem. A mechanic approached Helmet, tucked under his arm. His eyes flicked to Whitmore, then back to Margaret. We were told to keep it moving, he said, just until the audit. Silence fell heavy. Whitmore closed his eyes for a beat. When he opened them, something had changed again. Not just understanding, responsibility. Who told you? He asked. The mechanic hesitated, looked at the union rep, then spoke a name. Not Evans, not Whitmore's. A director. Someone who didn't walk the floor. Whitmore nodded once. Thank you. The director arrived before noon, face flushed, smile brittle. He laughed when Whitmore laid it out. Laughed until Margaret spoke. You're going to kill someone, she said. The room froze. The director bristled. That's out of line. So is your math, she said. You count output. I count bodies. Whitmore didn't interrupt. He watched the director's eyes dart the calculation begin. This is a witch hunt, the director said. No, the union rep said. It's a reckoning. The director left under escort. HR followed clipboard tight to her chest. The plant felt different afterward. Like a tooth pulled. Painful. Necessary. Evan leaned against a railing, pale. I thought we were building the future, he said. You are, Margaret said. Just not alone. The afternoon wore on. Meetings stacked. Voices rose. Margaret sat through most of it, pain-climbing temper, held in check by something steadier than anger. She spoke when it mattered. She listened when it didn't. She watched Whitmore absorb blows meant for her and return them with precision. As evening fell, the board called again. Whitmore took it in the glass room. The plant hummed below, cautious but alive. Margaret stood at the window, notebook closed, eyes tired. When he came out, his face was drawn. "They want a head," he said. "They usually do," Margaret said. "They want yours," he said quietly. She smiled, small and unsurprised. "Of course they do." "You stabilized the line," he said. "You exposed a liability." "I exposed the truth," she said. "That's expensive." He looked at her. Really looked. "I won't let them." She tilted her head. "You might have to." The words sat between them, heavy, honest. Evan approached, hands shoved in his pockets. "If they push you out," he said, "we lose everything you just gave us." Margaret shook her head. "You don't lose it if you carry it." Whitmore's phone buzzed again. He didn't answer it. He stared at the plant, at the people moving through it, at the woman who had changed it by refusing to move faster than it could survive. "I told you to fix it or you were done," he said. She met his eyes. "I fixed what mattered." He nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," he said, "we tell them how." Outside, the sky darkened. Inside, the plant kept breathing, not because it was ordered to, but because someone finally listened. The boardroom smelled like polished wood, an old certainty, the kind that never noticed who paid for it. Margaret sat at the far end of the table, notebook closed, hands folded to keep the tremor from showing. The windows framed the plant below like a map of consequences. She could see line 2 moving steady, forgiving as ever, and line 3 behaving because it was being watched. Whitmore stood when the call began. He did not sit. He rarely did now. "We're here to talk about risk," he said. A voice crackled through the speaker, clipped and distant. "We're here to talk about accountability." Margaret felt the weight of the word settle on her shoulders before it found its target. She did not flinch. She had learned a long time ago that flinching made men braver. "Start with the shutdown," another voice said. "Who authorized it?" Whitmore looked down the table. He looked at Margaret. He looked back at the speaker. "I did." There was a pause, the kind that meant recalculating. "That's not what our notes say." "They're wrong," Whitmore said. "I made the call." Margaret's fingers tightened. Evan sat 2 chairs away, jaw set, eyes fixed on the grain of the table. HR was there, pen-ready face, carefully neutral. The union rep stood by the wall, arms crossed, breathing slow. And the subsequent review, the first voice said, "Who led it?" Whitmore did not answer immediately. He took a breath. Margaret Hale did. A murmur, static. A laugh cut short. "Night maintenance," someone said. "Is that a joke?" "No," Whitmore said. "It's a correction." Margaret lifted her eyes. She met the camera. The red light glowed like a warning and a promise. "You're saying a non-manager identified systemic failures our own teams missed," another voice said. "I'm saying experience recognized patterns. Our dashboards filtered out," Whitmore said, "and that we asked the wrong questions because we measured the wrong things." Silence again. "Then bring her in." Margaret spoke before Whitmore could. "I'm already here." The board shifted. One voice softened. "Ms. Hale, you understand the exposure you've created." "I understand the exposure you've been carrying," Margaret said. Quietly. "You've implicated a director," the first voice said. "He implicated himself," Margaret said, "by rewarding speed over safety. That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious injury," Margaret said. "Or it will be." Evan inhaled sharply. The union rep nodded once. "What do you want?" the voice asked. Margaret did not hesitate. A pause on performance incentives tied to throughput. A joint review committee with floor representation. And time. A scoff. "You're asking us to slow down." "I'm asking you to survive," Margaret said. Whitmore felt the room lean. He stepped in. "We're bleeding credibility," he said. This is how we stop. Another pause. Then a different voice, older, steadier. Ms. Hale, why didn't you speak up earlier? Margaret looked at the window, at the plant that had raised her children and buried her husband. I did, she said, when it was safe to listen. The call ended without resolution. The red light went dark. The room exhaled. They'll circle, HR said softly. They always do. They'll try to isolate you, Evan said to Margaret. Make it personal. It already is, she said. She stood slowly, pain blooming, bright and familiar. That doesn't mean it's wrong. Outside the boardroom, the floor was louder. Whispers. Looks. Someone clapped once and stopped when no one joined. Margaret moved through it, like weather not a storm, not calm, something in between. By afternoon, the director's name leaked. By evening, the story bent in the telling. A simple woman. A shutdown. A threat. The plant buzzed with it. Phones vibrated. Messages stacked. Whitmore called Margaret into his office as dusk settled. The light was softer there, the edges less sharp. They're offering a compromise, he said. She waited. They'll suspend the incentives, he said. Temporary. They want a public statement. They want a face. Her mouth twitched. Mine. Yes. No, she said. He blinked. No. I won't be a shield, she said. You don't fix a roof by standing under it. He rubbed his temple. They're coming for you. They already have, she said. This way they miss. Evan knocked, then entered without waiting. His eyes were bright, restless. Safety found another bypass, he said. Different corridor. Same logic. Margaret nodded. It spread. Whitmore cursed under his breath. How deep? Deep enough that a memo won't fix it, Margaret said. Deep enough that you'll need to choose. Between what? Between looking decisive, she said, and being responsible. The phone rang. Whitmore stared at it. He let it ring. When it stopped, the silence was louder. I don't want to lose you, he said finally. She met his gaze. Then stop trying to use me. The plant shook slightly as a truck passed outside. The vibration traveled up the walls, through the floor, into their bones. Margaret felt it. She always did. That night, she stayed late. Evan stayed too. They walked the floor together, flashlight beams cutting through shadow. He asked questions now, real ones. She answered when she could. When she couldn't, she said so. You're tired, he said at one point. So are you, she said. That's how you know you're paying attention. They stopped near line 3. Margaret rested a hand on the railing, feeling the machine's rhythm. It's learning, she said. Evan smiled despite himself. So are we. The next morning, the board called again. This time, Whitmore sat. He listened. He took notes. When they finished, he closed the notebook and spoke. We're restructuring, he said, effective immediately. A voice laughed. Another swore. You don't have the authority. I do, Whitmore said. Under the emergency clause, you wrote and forgot. Silence, then anger, then threats. Whitmore did not raise his voice. He named dates. He named policies. He named risks they could not afford. When the call ended, he sagged. Margaret was already standing. What did you do? She asked. I fixed what I could, he said. She nodded. Good. HR entered pale. The press is calling. Whitmore looked at Margaret. They want you. She shook her head. They want a story. Give them one, he said. She considered. I will, she said, but not the one they expect. Outside, the plant ran steady. Inside, the story shifted its weight. Not toward applause. Toward something harder. Toward change that would cost and keep costing. Margaret picked up her notebook. She felt the ache. She felt the fear. She felt the ground under her feet and trusted it. The press didn't arrive with cameras first. They arrived with questions sharpened into blades. Margaret felt them before she saw them, the way you feel a storm through your knees. She stood near the edge of the floor while Whitmore spoke to a cluster of reporters just beyond the safety line, their shoes too clean for concrete, their eyes bright with hunger. "Is it true?" a woman asked, voice steady smile, practiced, that a maintenance worker shut down your plant. Whitmore didn't look at Margaret when he answered. "It's true that a senior specialist prevented a failure." "Senior," the woman repeated. "That's not what your records show." "That's what our reality shows," Whitmore said. The word reality drifted across the floor like dust. Evan stood a few feet behind Margaret, arms folded, watching her profile as if he were trying to memorize it. She did not look at the reporters. She looked at the line, at the rhythm she had coaxed back into it, at the people who now walked it slower. Eyes open. "Ms. Hale," another voice called louder. "Do you feel vindicated?" Vindicated. The word tasted wrong. Margaret closed her eyes for a beat, then stepped forward. The room tightened. Whitmore's jaw flexed. "I feel responsible," she said. A pause. Pens hovered. Cameras clicked now, late to the moment. "Responsible for what someone asked. For the people who get hurt when we rush," Margaret said. "And for the ones who don't get listened to." A murmur. Someone laughed, softly, unsure. "Are you saying management ignored you?" a man pressed. "I'm saying systems reward silence," Margaret said. "Until they don't." Whitmore watched the reporters pivot the way they smelled blood, and chose a direction. He felt the board's anger, already forming a distant thunder. The story broke by noon. Not clean, not kind. A simple woman, a threat. A shutdown. The details bent to fit the headline. Phones rang, emails stacked. HR fielded calls from lawyers who spoke in polite circles and meant sharp corners. By mid-afternoon, Margaret was called into safety, then compliance, then legal. Each room was smaller than the last, each chair harder. She answered questions with care. She corrected assumptions. She refused to be baited. "Did you exceed your authority?" Legal asked. "I exercised my duty," Margaret said. "Did anyone instruct you to do so?" "No." "Then why did you?" She looked at the table, the scratches, the rings left by careless cups. "Because the machine told me to stop." Legal sighed. "Machines don't speak." "They do," Margaret said, "just not in words." When she emerged, Evan was waiting. He handed her a bottle of water. "They're circling," he said. "They always do," she said. "They just don't always land." Whitmore met them in the hallway. He looked tired now, older. "The board wants a statement from you," he said. "I already gave one," Margaret said. "They want control," he said. "They want comfort," she said. He rubbed his eyes. "They're asking me to put you on leave." Evan stiffened. "That's retaliation." "They'll call it protection," Whitmore said. He looked at Margaret. "I can fight it. But it'll cost." Margaret considered. The ache in her hip flared. She leaned against the wall, the cool seeping through her jacket. "Let them," she said. Whitmore blinked. "What?" "Put me on leave," she said. "With terms." Evan stared. "You can't, I can," she said. "And I should." Whitmore frowned. "Why?" "Because they'll think they've won," she said. "And because I can work without being watched." He hesitated. "They'll say you're admitting fault. They already say that," she said. "This way I choose the ground." By evening, the email went out. Temporary leave. Independent review. Margaret Hale thanked for her service. The words were smooth, the edges sharp. The floor went quiet when people read it. Some looked at Margaret with anger, some with fear, some with relief. Evan's face burned. "This is bullshit," he said. Margaret smiled faintly. "It's strategy." She packed her locker slowly. The cane came out. She didn't hide it now. Her hands shook as she folded the notebook into her bag. Evan hovered helpless. "You're not done," he said. "Neither are you," she said. "Listen." He nodded, swallowing. "I will." At home, the silence was loud. Margaret set the bag down and sank into the chair by the window. Outside, the street hummed with ordinary life. She closed her eyes and let the pain crest and pass. She thought of her husband gone 10 years now, his laugh echoing in the kitchen when she came home covered in grease. "You don't quit a place like that," he used to say. "You outlast it." The phone rang. Unknown number. She let it ring twice, then answered. "Ms. Hale," a man said. His voice was calm, trained. "My name is Robert Klein. I'm calling on behalf of the board." Margaret waited. "We're concerned," Klein said, "about the narrative." "So am I," Margaret said. "We believe it would be prudent." He continued to distance the company from individual actions. "You mean mine?" she said. "Yes." "And what are you offering?" she asked. "A consulting arrangement," he said. "Quiet, temporary, generous." Margaret looked at her hands. The scars. The oil that never quite left. "No," she said. A pause. "You should reconsider." "I have," she said. "For decades." The line went dead. The next day the plant faltered. Not catastrophically, just enough. A missed alarm, a slowed conveyor. Evan called her voice tight. "They reinstated the incentives," he said. "Different name." Margaret closed her eyes. "Where?" He told her. She opened the notebook on her kitchen table. The pencil felt right in her hand. "I'll send you something," she said. "You're not supposed to," he said. "I'm on leave," she said. "Not asleep." The file went out under Evan's name. The fix worked. The incident was logged as a training success. No mention of Margaret. Whitmore called that night. "They're playing games," he said. "They always do," she said. "I'm losing ground," he said. "You're learning where it is," she said. By the end of the week, the press had moved on. Another outrage. Another face. The plant kept running. The bypasses were sealed. The committee met without her and argued in circles. Margaret watched from the outside, patient. She met with the union rep at a diner off the highway, coffee bitter pie too sweet. She spoke to safety off the record. She listened more than she talked. She planted things. On Friday, Evan showed up at her door. He looked wrecked. "They want me to sign off on a report," he said. "It says the issue was resolved by software." Margaret took the paper. Read it. Set it down. "Will you?" she asked. He shook his head. "No." "Then don't," she said. "They'll fire me," maybe she said. "Or maybe they'll realize you're expensive to lose." He laughed short and scared. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," she said. "It's human." When he left, Margaret stood at the window again. The plant lights glowed in the distance. She felt the pull of it, the work unfinished. She also felt something else quieter and stronger. The sense that the fix was no longer a machine. It was a company. The email landed at 6:30 in the morning. Subject line bland enough to be dangerous. Mandatory alignment session. Attendance required. Margaret read it twice then, once more without blinking. She felt the old familiar tightening behind her ribs, the place where fear tried to dress itself up as caution. She closed the laptop and made coffee. The kettle screamed. She let it. By 8, the plant parking lot was half full. Margaret sat in her car, with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the tick of cooling metal. She was technically on leave. She had not been told not to come. That was how these things worked. Silence as a weapon, ambiguity as permission. Inside the alignment session had the feel of a sermon without faith. Rows of chairs, a screen glowing blue, coffee cooling in paper cups. Evan sat near the aisle leg, bouncing eyes fixed forward. When he saw Margaret, his shoulders dropped an inch relief, leaking through before he could stop it. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, as she took the empty seat beside him. "They invited me," she said. "They just didn't sign it." Up front, Robert Klein adjusted the microphone. Board liaison, consultant, the kind of man who wore concern like cologne. He smiled, practiced and wide. "We're here to reset," he said, "to get everyone aligned on priorities." Margaret felt the room lean forward. She smelled fear. She smelled ambition. She smelled the faint metallic note of something about to break. Klein clicked the remote. A slide appeared. Throughput targets, revised metrics, new language, same math. Evan's jaw clenched. Margaret watched hands lift questions, couched in politeness, answers wrapped in fog. When someone mentioned safety, Klein nodded gravely and moved on. When someone mentioned night shift, he smiled and thanked them for their dedication. "This is about trust," Klein said finally. "About believing in the system." Margaret raised her hand. The room froze. Klein blinked, then nodded. "Ms. Hale, you changed the words," Margaret said, "not the incentives." Klein's smile tightened. "We simplified. You disguised," she said. "There's a difference." A murmur ran the rows. Evan stared at his shoes. Klein clasped his hands. "We appreciate your passion," he said. "But the review is ongoing. This isn't the forum." "It's the floor," Margaret said. "It's always the forum." Klein glanced toward the door, toward Whitmore, who stood there unreadable. "We'll take that under advisement." Margaret stood. The pain flared. She ignored it. "You're asking people to sign off on a lie," she said. "And you're calling it alignment." Klein's voice hardened. "This is inappropriate. So is pretending we fixed what we didn't," Margaret said. Security shifted. A supervisor cleared his throat. Whitmore stepped forward. "That's enough," he said. The words landed heavy. For a moment, Margaret wondered if he meant her. Then he looked at Klein. "It is enough," Whitmore said again. "Of this." Klein's eyes flashed. "Daniel, you don't run this floor," Whitmore said. "You advise." Klein laughed sharp. "Careful. The board won't like." "The board likes results," Whitmore said. "They don't like funerals." Silence. Thick. Real. Whitmore turned to the room. "We are pausing the revised metrics," he said. "Effective now." Klein sputtered. "You can't, I can," Whitmore said. "And I am." Margaret felt the room exhale, not relief, something closer to grief lifting. After the hallway buzzed, Klein disappeared into a side office with HR. Evan sagged against the wall. "You did that," he said to Margaret. "No," she said. "He did." Whitmore found her near the lockers. His face was pale. "They'll come for me," he said. "They already are," she said. He nodded. "I need your help." She studied him, the man beneath the title, the weight he carried now that he had chosen it. "You need the truth," she said. "Not me. I need both," he said. They met that afternoon in a small conference room with no windows. Safety, union, a few engineers. Margaret sat with her notebook open, pencil poised. She did not lead. She listened. When she spoke, it was to connect, not command. Patterns emerged. Pressure flowed downhill. Credit flowed up. The room grew angry, then focused. Decisions were made, slowly, painfully. Names were not spoken. Yet, by evening word spread. Klein had been escorted out. Consulting contract suspended. An audit announced. The board furious. The plant cautious, hopeful. Margaret left before dark. At home, she sank into the chair and let the pain take its due. She slept without dreams. The call came just before midnight. Unknown number again. "Miss Hale," a woman said. Her voice was low, careful. "This is Eleanor Price." Margaret sat up. She knew the name. Everyone did. Chair of the board. Quiet power, old money, older memory. I've been following, Price said. Closely. Margaret said nothing. You've caused quite a stir, Price continued. And quite a service. I didn't set out to, Margaret said. I believe you, Price said, which is why I'm calling. Margaret waited. We need to understand the scope, Price said. The depth. The cost of doing it right. And if you don't like the answer, Margaret said, then we'll have to decide who we are, Price said. A pause. Long. Respectful. I want you back, Price said. Officially. Margaret closed her eyes. On what terms? You'll define them, Price said. With Daniel. Margaret felt the ground shift. Not under her feet. Under the company. I won't be a figurehead, Margaret said. I wouldn't insult you, Price said. The line went quiet. At the plant, the next morning, the mood was electric. Fear braided with hope. Evan met Margaret at the door, eyes wide. They're saying the board's coming, he whispered. They already did, Margaret said. Whitmore joined them, tie-loose eyes bright with exhaustion. She called you, he said. She did, Margaret said. He nodded. Then it's time. For what Evan asked. For the truth, Whitmore said. All of it. Margaret looked at the floor. At the machines listening. At the people learning how. She opened her notebook. Then let's stop pretending this is about a shutdown, she said, and start talking about a company. The camera would have pulled back then, catching the plant, waking into something new. Not fixed, not safe, but honest enough to begin. The board arrived without ceremony, black sedans, gliding into the lot like they owned the ground beneath them. Margaret watched from the floor as coats were shrugged on and faces tightened. The machines kept their rhythm indifferent to titles. She liked that. They gathered in the small conference room this time. No glass walls, no audience. The air smelled faintly of paper and old leather. Eleanor Price sat at the head posture, straight eyes sharp, with a patience earned the hard way. Whitmore took the seat to her right. Margaret sat opposite notebook, closed hands resting on the table as if to keep it steady. Let's begin, Price said. With facts. Safety spoke first. Numbers without drama. Near misses mapped to hours. To corridors to incentives. Union followed. Names withheld, patterns named. HR spoke last, voice measured, admitting what had been tolerated because it moved the needle. When it was Margaret's turn, she did not stand. She did not raise her voice. She slid the notebook forward and opened it. These are not my ideas, she said. They're the company's memory. Price leaned in. The pencil lines, the annotations, the dates, years layered like sediment. You kept this alone. I wasn't alone, Margaret said. I was ignored. A director shifted. You're asking us to upend compensation. I'm asking you to stop paying people to gamble with bones, Margaret said. Whitmore felt the room tense. He spoke. We're already losing more to churn than this will cost. Price nodded. We will confirm. Another director cleared his throat. And your role. Margaret met his gaze. Advisor, builder, trainer, not a symbol. Silence. Then Price smiled, just barely. Good. They broke for lunch without small talk. Outside, reporters waited. Inside, the plant hummed. Evan paced near the locker's hands, shaking. When Margaret passed, he looked up. They're grilling him, he said. They should, Margaret said. That's how heat works. Whitmore emerged an hour later, tie loosened, further jaw set. They want a demonstration, he said, of what Evan asked. Of trust, Whitmore said. They want to see the floor decide. The floor decided faster than anyone expected. A pilot team formed by volunteers, old hands paired with new. Metrics rewritten on whiteboards. Incentives paused, replaced with thresholds that punished nothing and rewarded care. The machines noticed. The line settled into a deeper rhythm. Price walked the floor in flats, listening more than she spoke. She stopped by line 3 and watched a young engineer adjust a panel, while a veteran stood close, not hovering, just present. "This," Price said quietly to Margaret, "is expensive." Margaret nodded. "So is funerals." The afternoon brought resistance, emails sharp as glass, calls from investors who spoke of momentum and optics. Whitmore absorbed them. He stopped forwarding the worst. By evening, the board reconvened. Price spoke first. "We proceed." A director protested. Another wavered. Price waited them out. "We proceed." She repeated, and it was done. They drafted language that night. Not press-ready. Honest. Margaret read it twice, crossed out a line, added another. Whitmore watched her write and felt something settle into place. "You're sure?" he asked. "I've been sure longer than you've been scared," she said. He laughed once, breathless. "Fair." The announcement went out at dawn. Restructure, safety first incentives, joint oversight. A new office, not a title for Margaret Hale. Advisor to operations. Builder of bridges. The backlash came hard. Comment sections flared. A talking head sneered about tradition. Another praised courage. The stock dipped, then steadied. The plant ran. Evans signed the report with his name and the truth. He was not fired. He slept that night. Margaret stood on the floor as the first shift changed, watching faces soften into something like pride. A mechanic approached, cap in hand. "You stayed," he said. "So did you," Margaret said. He nodded. "Thank you." Later, alone in the conference room, Price closed the door. "I want to be clear," she said. "This will cost us." Margaret met her eyes. "Then we'll pay it." Price smiled, this time fully. "You're not simple," she said. Margaret shook her head. "I'm ordinary." Price considered that. That may be the point. As night fell, the plant lights glowed steady. Whitmore walked the floor without speaking. Evan followed, asking questions he hadn't known to ask. Margaret watched them go, then opened her notebook, and wrote a single line she'd been waiting to write. Listen first. The camera would have lingered there on the pencil, moving on the machines, answering on a company, learning slowly, expensively how to hear itself. The first real test didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly wrapped in good intentions and calendar invites, the kind that looked harmless until they weren't. Margaret felt it before the alarms did a thinning in the rhythm, a hesitation that didn't belong. She was on the floor before dawn, notebook, open pencil tapping, once, twice, stopping. Evan joined her with a yawn he tried to hide. "Night shift says everything's green," he said. "Green can lie," Margaret said. They walked line 3 together. The air felt wrong. Not hot, not cold. Off. Margaret crouched, knees protesting, and pressed her palm to the casing. She listened. The machine answered with a sound like a held breath. "Who authorized the calibration change?" she asked. Evan checked his tablet. "It's scheduled. Executive request. Efficiency pass." Margaret closed her eyes. "Show me the parameters." They weren't dramatic. That was the problem. Marginal adjustments, stacked on each other, shaving seconds here, tolerance there. Safe on paper, dangerous in combination. 1,000 cuts you didn't feel until you bled. Whitmore arrived mid-morning coat, still on eyes sharp. "What's wrong?" "What's planned?" Margaret said. She pointed. "Someone's testing the edges." "Who?" She shrugged. "Someone who thinks we blinked." They gathered the pilot team. Old hands and new faces serious. Margaret spoke without ceremony. "We're rolling back the changes," she said. "Now." A young analyst hesitated. "The invite says, 'I don't care what it says.'" Margaret said, "I care what breaks." They rolled it back. The machine exhaled. The rhythm returned. By noon, the email arrived. Firm, polite, displeased. The language of disappointment dressed as concern. A director CC'd. Klein's name nowhere in sight, but his fingerprints all over the tone. Whitmore read it twice. "They're daring us," he said. "They're measuring us," Margaret said, "to see if we flinch." He didn't. He replied with data and dates, and a sentence that refused to apologize. The afternoon brought a visitor. A man in a tailored suit who smiled with his eyes closed. He shook hands, complimented the floor, spoke of alignment and shareholder confidence. He never said safety, not once. Margaret watched him watch the machines. "You don't hear it," she said. He blinked. "Hear what?" "Exactly," she said. He laughed too loud. "We appreciate your passion. It's not passion," she said. "It's memory." He left with a promise to follow up. He did not. The next morning, an incident, small, a dropped component, a scraped knuckle, logged and shrugged. Margaret stared at the report. Same corridor, same time, different name. She called safety. She called the union. She called Whitmore. "It's spreading," she said. Whitmore swore. "They're testing limits." "They're teaching habits," Margaret said. "Bad ones." The board called at noon. Not Price. Others. Questions framed like accusations. Why slow now? Why resist progress? Why let fear dictate strategy? Margaret listened from the side hands, folded back, aching. When Whitmore faltered, she spoke. "You're not afraid," she said. "You're impatient. There's a difference." Silence. Then a scoff. "You don't understand markets." "I understand consequences," Margaret said. "They arrive whether you believe in them or not." After the call, Whitmore slumped. "They're lining up votes." "For what Evan asked." "For me," Whitmore said. "And for you." Margaret closed her notebook. "Then we stopped playing defense. She asked for access. Not special, complete. She asked for the old files, the ones no one liked to talk about. She asked for incident reports that never made it past middle management. She asked for time. Price granted it without comment. The picture emerged slowly. Incentives renamed. Targets shifted. Pressure rerouted through contractors and consultants. Plausible deniability built like scaffolding around a lie. Margaret mapped it with a patience that hurt. They didn't learn. Evan said quietly as he watched the web grow. "They learned the wrong lesson," Margaret said. "That if you dress it well, no one looks close." They presented at dusk, not to the board, to the floor, to the people who felt it first. Margaret stood with the notebook open, voice calm. "This is how it happens," she said. "Not with villains, with shortcuts." Hands rose, stories spilled. Near misses confessed. Shame lifted. Responsibility took its place. By night, the plant buzzed with something new. Not panic, resolve. The retaliation came faster after that. A budget freeze, a hiring pause, a memo about discipline and chain of command. Evan received a warning for bypassing approval. He showed it to Margaret, jaw tight. "Do I sign?" he asked. "No," she said. "You document." Whitmore called Price at midnight. He did not hedge, he laid it out. The testing, the pressure, the intent. Price listened, then spoke. "They're forcing my hand," she said. "They think you won't use it," Whitmore said. "They're wrong," Price said. The next day, the board split. Not evenly, enough. Emotion tabled. An audit widened. Names surfaced. The man with the closed eyes was suddenly unavailable. The plant breathed easier for an hour. Then the lights flickered. Not a shutdown, not a failure. A reminder. The siren inhaled and stopped. Margaret stood still, heart steady, pain loud. She closed her eyes and listened. She heard it, the thing that didn't belong. She opened them and pointed. "There," she said. "That's not us." They moved fast, faster than before, because now they knew when speed mattered. They isolated. They corrected. They logged everything. The lights steadied. When it was over, Whitmore leaned against a railing, shaking. "They tried to scare us," he said. "They tried to see if we'd blink." Margaret said. "We didn't." Price arrived that evening without announcement. She walked the floor, spoke to no one at first, then to everyone. She asked questions that cut through noise. She listened to answers she didn't like. In the small conference room, she faced Whitmore and Margaret. "This ends," she said. "Tonight," Hal Whitmore asked. "With sunlight," Price said, "and consequences." Margaret felt the ache deepen. She welcomed it. "Then be honest," she said. "All the way." Price nodded. "All the way." Outside, the plant lights held. Inside, something old cracked, and something new took its place. Not trust yet, not safety guaranteed, but the will to choose both, even when it hurt. Margaret opened her notebook and added another line beneath the first. "Tell the truth when it costs you." The machines answered steady and alive. The reckoning did not come with sirens. It came with calendars wiped clean and doors left open on purpose. Margaret arrived to find the conference room rearranged into a circle, no head, no foot chairs, close enough to hear breathing. Sunlight cut through the blinds and made the dust honest. Price was already there, jacket-folded sleeves rolled like she meant to work. Whitmore stood by the window phone, face down. Evan slipped in last eyes, wary, a folded report clutched to his chest. "Sit," Price said, and everyone did. "We're done negotiating with shadows," Price said. "Today, we name what happened, who benefited, and who pays." Margaret felt the ache in her hip throb, steady and familiar. She welcomed it. Pain kept her present. Safety spoke. Then compliance. Then audit voices measured facts unadorned. Emails recovered. Calendars aligned. Consultants paid to say nothing. Incentives laundered through language. The story assembled itself without drama, which made it worse. When it was Margaret's turn, she slid her notebook to the center. "This is where it crossed the line," she said. "Not when someone fell. When we decided falling was acceptable, if it didn't slow us." A director's jaw tightened. "You're assigning motive." "I'm assigning cause," Margaret said. "Motive follows." Price watched faces. She noticed who looked away. She noticed who leaned in. "We are terminating contracts," she said. "Today, we are clawing back bonuses tied to the revised metrics. We are notifying regulators before they notify us," a voice protested. Another pleaded for timing. Price held up a hand. "Timing is why we're here." Whitmore spoke then, voice low. "I failed to stop it sooner." Price nodded. "You did, and you stopped it now." Evan swallowed. "What about us?" he asked. "The people who signed." Price met his eyes. "We distinguish between pressure and intent," she said. "And we protect those who told the truth when it cost them." The meeting ended without applause. It ended with tasks, calls to make, letters to send, a schedule for consequences. Outside, the floor waited. Word spread in a way no memo could manage. People gathered quiet, bracing. Margaret walked among them, feeling the change like weather turning. A mechanic touched his cap. A supervisor nodded relief, and fear braided together. By noon, the first termination email went out, then another. The consultant with the closed eyes was named. A director resigned. The market reacted the way markets always do, briefly and loudly. The plant kept running. Evan cornered Margaret near the lockers. "They asked me to present," he said. "To explain the technical failures. You can," she said, "if you tell it straight." "I will," he said. His hands shook. He did not hide it. Whitmore joined them, face drawn. "Price wants us together," he said. "Press in an hour." Margaret closed her notebook. "Say less," she said. "Mean more." The press room was smaller than expected. Fewer cameras, sharper questions. Price stood at the center. Whitmore to one side, Margaret to the other, not by design, but by gravity. Price spoke first. She did not read. "We made choices that prioritize speed over safety," she said. "We are reversing them. We are accepting the cost." A reporter raised a hand. "Are you blaming individuals?" "We are naming responsibility," Price said. "And we are changing systems." Another voice. "Is this about one employee?" Margaret felt Whitmore glance at her. Price answered, "This is about listening to the floor." Margaret stepped forward when called. She kept her answers short. She spoke of thresholds and incentives and memory. She refused the frame of hero and villain. After the plant exhaled, the kind of exhale that comes after a fever breaks not after a cure. HR moved with purpose. Safety posted new protocols with names attached. The union rep smiled without humor. "This sticks," he said. It did. Inspectors arrived. Not hostile, thorough. They asked Margaret questions she had waited years to answer. She answered them slowly, fully. She did not soften edges. Late afternoon brought an unexpected quiet. Margaret sat at her kitchen table, notebook open, pencil resting. The phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "Ms. Hale," a man said, voice careful. "I'm calling from the regulator's office." She waited. "We'd like you to consult," he said. "On a broader review." Margaret closed her eyes. "I won't be a mascot," she said. "We need your memory," he said. She considered. "Then listen." At the plant, Evan delivered his presentation. He told the truth. He showed where code met pressure and buckled. He named his own fear. He did not flinch. When he finished, the room was quiet. Someone clapped once. Others followed. Whitmore found Margaret by the line at shift change. "They offered me a choice," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Step aside after the quarter," he said, "or stay and finish it." She studied his face. The man who had learned the weight of listening. "What do you want?" she asked. "To stay," he said, "and to deserve it." She nodded. "Then stay." The day ended without fireworks. The plant lights glowed steady. People went home, tired and lighter. Margaret lingered, palm on the casing, listening. The machine answered with a sound she trusted. That night, Price called again. "We'll be in the history books," she said dryly. Margaret smiled. "Only if we stop doing the work." Price laughed. "You're impossible." "I'm ordinary," Margaret said. Silence, then warmth. "That may save us." Margaret hung up and wrote one more line in her notebook. "Pay the cost now or pay it later." The pencil stopped. The page was full. The story wasn't. The plant woke without tension. For the first time in months, lights, steady conveyors, breathing in a rhythm that didn't hurry itself. Margaret arrived just after dawn. Coat folded over her arm cane, tapping once, before she remembered she didn't need it today. She paused at the threshold, listening. The machines answered with something close to trust. Whitmore was already on the floor, sleeves rolled, speaking quietly with a mechanic whose name he now knew. He didn't straighten when he saw Margaret. He waited until the mechanic finished, shook his hand, then crossed the aisle. "We closed the last incentive loophole," he said. "Audit signed off." Margaret nodded. "And the habits? They're changing," he said. "Slowly." "Good," she said. "Fast change snaps." Evan approached with a tablet tucked under his arm, eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks. "Training modules live," he said. "Paired rotations. Old systems, new code." Margaret smiled, small and genuine. "You wrote it." "We wrote it," Evan said, glancing toward the floor, where a veteran showed a junior how to listen for a sound that meant trouble. Price arrived mid-morning without a convoy flats, scuffed by concrete jacket unbuttoned. She walked the floor again, stopping where people worked, asking questions she waited to hear the answers to. When she reached Margaret, she held out a folder. Formal offer, Price said. Senior Technical Advisor. Cross-functional authority. No speeches required. Margaret took the folder, felt its weight. I won't manage people, she said. I'll build bridges. Price nodded. That's the job. They signed at a workbench, pens scratching over steel, scarred by years of honest labor. No applause, just a breath released. The afternoon brought the first external report. Regulators acknowledged the disclosures. Fines were assessed, smaller than feared, larger than comfortable. Whitmore read the numbers without blinking. We can carry it, he said. Margaret watched him set the paper down. You already are. News ticked across screens beyond the plant, then faded, as news always did. Inside the changes stuck because they were owned. Safety posted updates with signatures. The union rep shook hands with HR and meant it. Contractors learned new rules and kept their contracts by following them. Late in the day, Margaret stood by line 3 palm on the casing, feeling the pulse. Evan joined her, quiet. I used to think power was code, he said. It is, Margaret said. And people. Whitmore approached slower, now less armored. The board wants to know how we keep this from slipping back. Margaret didn't answer immediately. She looked down the aisle where light pooled on the floor. You keep listening, she said, when it's boring, when it costs you, especially then. He nodded. Stay. I am, she said. At dusk, the shift changed. People lingered instead of rushing out. A mechanic pressed a folded card into Margaret's hand. She opened it later at her desk. Thanks, it said. One word. Enough. She sat with the notebook open, pencil poised, then closed it without writing. Some pages didn't need more ink. Outside the window, the parking lot emptied. Inside, the plant kept breathing. Whitmore stopped by once more before leaving. They'll call you a story, he said. They can, Margaret said. Stories teach. He smiled, tired and true. I'll see you tomorrow. Count on it, she said. When the lights dimmed to night mode, Margaret walked the floor one last time, touching railings, listening to the quiet between sounds. She felt the ache in her hip and welcomed it a reminder that work done right left marks. At the door, she turned back once taking it in. Not fixed, not perfect, honest. If this story stayed with you, if it sounded like a place you've worked or a choice you've faced, tap like to support the work. Subscribe to walk with us through stories of dignity and consequence, and comment. 3 words only. Tell your story.